For well over 30 years, Congress has prevented the federal funding of abortions through a patchwork of amendments that are added to various appropriations bills during each budget cycle, prohibiting the federal funding of abortions through their funded programs. Now is the time to pass one piece of legislation that puts members on record supporting a prohibition on any federal funding of abortion, no matter where in the federal system that funding might occur. In poll after poll, the American people have overwhelmingly expressed their opposition to the federal funding of abortions. H.R. 7 will ensure that American taxpayers are not involved in funding the destruction of innocent human life through abortion on demand. The No Taxpayer Funding of Abortion Act will establish a government-wide statutory prohibition on abortion funding by making permanent the various policies Congress has implemented on a case-by-case basis, including the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits funding for elective abortion coverage through any program funded through the annual Labor, Health, and Human Services Appropriations Act. The Helms Amendment, which prohibits funding for abortion as a method of family planning overseas. The Smith Amendment, which prohibits funding for elective abortion coverage for federal employees. The Dornan Amendment, which prohibits the use of congressionally appropriated funds for abortion in the District of Columbia, and other policies such as the restrictions on elective abortion funding through the Peace Corps and federal prisons. Now, absolutely nothing in the Democrats' unpopular health care law prevents the federal funding of abortions under the program it creates. Representatives Joe Pitts and former Representative Bart Stupak offered an amendment to the bill during the 111th Congress that would have prohibited government funding of abortion had it been included in the final Health Care Reform Act. But that provision was stripped out of the Senate bill the President signed into law. In a last-minute effort to work a face-saving political deal, the President said he would sign an executive order that claimed to limit federal funding of abortions in some way. And then in an interview with the Chicago Tribune editorial board, former White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel emphasized that the executive order signed by President Obama does not carry the force of law, and as such was approved by the former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and others who oppose a ban on taxpayer funding of abortion. Mr. Emanuel said, I quote, came up with the idea for an executive order to allow the Stupak Amendment not to exist in law, unquote. There you have it. In the words of the President's Chief of Staff at the time, the Obamacare law provides for the federal taxpayer funding of abortions. Any member who opposes that policy must support H.R. 7, which would at last put back into law the principle of the bipartisan Hyde Amendment and place a federal government-wide ban on the federal funding of the destruction of innocent human life. Now, I am fully aware of the controversy surrounding the underlying issues here, and throughout history there has often been great intensity surrounding the debates over protecting the innocent lives of those who, through no fault of their own, find themselves obscured in the shadows of humanity. It encourages me greatly that in nearly all of those cases, the collective conscience was finally moved in favor of the victims. The same thing is beginning to happen in this debate related to innocent unborn children. We're beginning to ask ourselves the real question, does abortion take the life of a child? And we're beginning to finally able to realize as a human family that it does. Ultrasound technology now demonstrates to all reasonable observers both the humanity of the victim and the inhumanity of what is being done to them. And we are beginning to realize as Americans that brutally taking the lives of the innocent unborn does not liberate anyone, and that 50 million dead children is enough.